Welcome to our presentations titled Couples and Money, Creating a Thriving Future Together, which is part of our Money Matters series here at the Champaign Public Library. I'm Eva Liu, a reference librarian at the library. Thank you all for joining us. I would like to introduce our presenter for the evening, Daley Anderson. She is a financial advisor who is passionate about helping people use their financial resources in ways that support their lives and things that matter most to them. Daley is managing partner and co-owner of Tenant Wealth Partners, a financial planning and investment managing firm locally in Champaign. She is a certified financial planner professional and holds the Chartered Financial Analyst designation, one of the most globally respected and recognized investment credentials. Daley is active presenter and educator in financial planning subjects, most recently co-creating and teaching a course at the University of Illinois called Women, Money, and Power. Daley, thank you for joining us, for being with us. And with that, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. I am so excited to be here tonight because Champaign Public Library is absolutely one of my favorite places to come. I like to take my children. I've got an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and we love the activities. We love to go to the little play center. We get tons of books and audiobooks. Like, my kids love coming here. So this is a really special place for me, and I was really, really pleased when I was asked to do this presentation, especially because this is on a topic that I'm so passionate about. As Eva introduced, I'm a financial planner, and my passion in financial planning is really helping people create a thriving future that they believe in and that they love. And with that really means coming from your core values, understanding what those are so that you can make financial decisions that align with who you are and who you want to be. And when we think about financial planning, really the crux of that is balancing this ongoing tension between what we need and what we want today and what we need and we're going to want in the future. And those two kind of elements really can cause some stress and tension because they are sometimes at odds. And so that's one of the things that we'll talk about today. And I'm excited to kind of bring this presentation to everyone. It's called Couples and Money, Creating a Thriving Future Together. So as we start, I thought it would be great to share a little story to break the ice about how I learned more about my husband. So I like to say that everything I needed to know about my husband, I learned during a trip to IKEA. So when my husband and I were first married and we were moving into our first apartment together, I had been really dreaming up this wardrobe. I wanted to have the most beautiful, organized wardrobe where I could have, all of my precious belts and shoes and perfumes and my clothes all displayed almost like a high-end boutique. Yes, this was many years ago. Yes, this was before we had children and animals, and this was very much a dual income, no kid type of situation, type of dream. Nonetheless, it was important to me at the time. And so for months, I had been planning out this beautiful wardrobe, and I always called it a wardrobe. My husband would sometimes say, "Oh, are we gonna go pick out that closet sometime?" No. It was a wardrobe. I always corrected him. And now I can laugh at myself because, of course, I feel a little bit silly thinking about that now. It's not quite as important to me as it was then. But I did spend quite a bit of time dreaming up this wardrobe. And probably many of you here have used Pinterest to kind of post idea boards and mood boards of what you're feeling, what you'd like. Well, this was my Pinterest board. It had lots of pictures of pretty closets, pretty wardrobes with that looked like kind of boutique-y. They looked like a high-end boutique. And that was really, really something that I thought would be really cool to have. And my husband and I, we decided one day, we drove to IKEA in Schaumburg. It was a nice drive up there. And we decided, okay, today's the day we're going to pick out this wardrobe. So as we get to the IKEA showroom, we go into the special wardrobe and shelving area, and they have these computer monitors, a little bit like you see at the library when you're looking for a book. They have these computer monitors where you can create, your own picture, your own model of a wardrobe. And my husband's techie, and he's, pretty savvy with that type of thing. So he gets to the computer and he's pulling up things, and out of his pocket he pulls out a list. I didn't know about this list. I don't know what was on this list. And he starts, looking at this list and then pulling things from here and there, and all of a sudden he was concocting this. I would actually call this a closet. It was brown, it didn't have glass doors, it did not look like a high-end boutique, it was very practical. And I looked at his list, and his list had measures to specific dimensions. So he had measured out our space where we were going to put this, and he knew exactly the dimensions that it needed to be. All right, that's pretty practical. No sharp corners. So Magnus was thinking about the future. He was thinking about future kids and childproofing. I was not thinking about that. It needed to be able to be anchored to the wall. Again, forward thinking. It needed to be able to fit some clothes in it, some shoes. It's a closet, done. Well, that's where we were really not in agreement. And as he was putting this closet together on the computer terminal, my face was kind of turning red. I was looking a little shifty. I was getting a little irritated. And I think he sensed something was a little bit wrong. So we took a break to get some meatballs and some potatoes at the cafeteria at IKEA, because you got to have that when you go to IKEA. And we sat down and we compared notes. So we looked at his list, and I said, I get it. Those are pretty practical. That's okay. I think we can work with that. And then we went back to my list. My list meant I wanted glass doors. I wanted to have some lights overhead so that it had a perfect kind of lighting. I wanted it to be pretty. I wanted it to have specific drawers with dividers for belts and socks and ties. I wanted a space for my perfume collection to be displayed. I wanted it to look like you were walking into a high-end boutique. It's not a closet, I said, it's a vibe. And I think we both kind of nodded and said, okay, I think we can combine these lists. We can work with this. We can compromise, and we can figure out that together, actually, this wardrobe's probably going to be better off than it would have if either one of us had come alone with our list. And so together, we went back to that computer monitor. We put in all of his specifications, but we made sure that it had glass doors, that it had special lights, that I had all the compartments that I wanted to, make it kind of that vibe that I wanted. And so what we really kind of found out was that, yeah, Magnus is pretty practical. He's really thinking about not just the here and now, but the future. He's planning for children. He's thinking, hey, having sharp corners, glass doors, and a wardrobe that could tip over is not a good plan when you have pets and children. All right, I'll give that to him. But I was thinking about the here and now. I was thinking about the present. I was thinking about how enjoyable and how nice that wardrobe would be and what we were really looking for. And together, when we put our heads together and we thought about all of this and made decisions, we got something that was better than either one of our lists could have been. So now I want to take a moment, and I want everybody here to take a moment to take this little quiz. So if you are watching right now online, there should be a PDF that's posted near the YouTube, and you can just simply, print it or just, pull it up on your screen. So here it is, and I'm going to explain the instructions. So you're going to see here, list of words, okay? I don't want you to think too much about this. I want you to take your pencil. I want you to read through these list of words, and then if you see a word that resonates with you, that you think, hey, that describes me. I feel like that's probably a good characteristic. Like that's something that's a characteristic of mine. Circle it. Don't think too much. Don't second guess it. Just keep moving on. You can circle as many or as few as you want, but make sure you go through each of the words on the list and pick the ones that you think are the most descriptive of your personality. All right. Give you a moment here. Now don't look at your partner's answers. We're not looking for, this is not a, this is not a group quiz here. All right, I see some heads poking up here. If you're online and watching right now and you haven't finished, go ahead and press the pause. When you're done, come back. All right, so the next step I want you to do, at the top of each of these columns, write an R, an O, an L, and an E. Finally, I want you to add the total that you've circled in each of these columns. So as you can see in this example, we've circled 5 in the first column, 4 in the second, 2 in the third, 1 in the fourth. Has everybody done that? All right, told you it would be easy. All right, so each one of these columns actually represents a different personality type when it comes to money. Next thing I would have you do is look at the 2 columns that you've scored the highest, so you've circled the most words in. Okay? Those 2 columns are going to be more of a dominant type of personality traits. Now I'm going to walk through what those mean. Okay? So if you scored high on the R column, that means you scored high in responsibility. So people who have this personality traits are often data-driven, more analytical. They make decisions that are very, tend to be logical and less emotion-based. When I think of somebody in this category, I think of kind of the consummate planner. They are thinking about the future. They're thinking through all the hypotheticals and making decisions based on the most likely occurrence. So I would say in my story of a trip to IKEA, my husband definitely scores very high in the R space. High on that planner dimension. Now, that sounds all very, very good. These are all great personality traits, right? Sometimes unchecked, when we kind of have a very high area in this personality trait, sometimes we think too far in the future. Sometimes we're making decisions that, we're not always factoring in the emotions or the values or kind of the here and now and the enjoyment that it will cause. Sometimes, especially if we have a partner who we're making decisions with who is more maybe emotion-based or a little bit more on the loving or the caregiving type of side, this financial personality can feel a little bit cold sometimes. So if you scored high in this area, we're not calling you cold. That doesn't mean that you are cold. It just means that sometimes you may make decisions that are a bit more factual, a bit more logical, and it could be helpful to come out of that perspective and remember that sometimes, your partner may be making decisions that are based a little bit more on the here and now or based a little bit more on emotion. The next personality type here is organization. So organization, if anybody's watched Friends before, this is Monica Geller from Friends. Anybody remember her? She was really hyper-organized. She loved to clean, she liked order, she liked everybody to follow those rules, but to what end? Like, she really enjoyed those things. But sometimes, I think we could say that Monica got lost in the organization and the cleanliness of it all. Sometimes she missed the point. Like here, we're supposed to start having fun in 15 minutes. Somehow that doesn't quite track, right? So somebody who's high in the organization area may be really good at creating a budget, for example. They like all the data. They like to put it in neat little categories and boxes. They like to track the information. Sometimes, though, they may not always know necessarily what the next step is or how to use that data. So people who are high on organization, if you've got a partner or if you yourself is high on that organization personality style, you might be really great at pulling those informations together for, your money dates so that, hey, we can see exactly where we are. We're going to track our net worth. We're going to track our budget. We're going to track all these things. And that can be really, really helpful. The person that's organization focused, I would say this is also a bit more of a forward-looking personality type as well. So thinking a little bit more about the future and, knowing that organization can allow, better decisions in the future as well, because you have cleaner data and cleaner information to work with. The next personality type here is loving. So this person is characterized by a very high need to take care of others around them. So they are very much the consummate caregiver. That's where they may value their family, and they may really value spending money to make sure that their family is really thriving in the here and now. Sometimes this personality type can be can sometimes find that they are overvaluing or kind of putting over focus on the here and now and making sure that everybody is taken care of, and sometimes can sacrifice thinking about the future, because a lot of times this personality type is really looking to take care of today. This is a wonderful personality type, just like all of them. They all have their pros and cons. This personality type is seeing to the content of life, seeing that they're thriving in the everyday, that everyone is taken care of. I can say that probably if you're giving a spouse a grocery list to go to the grocery and go to the grocery store, the responsibility personality or the organized personality, they're probably going to get everything on the list. They may not get anything more on the list. They maybe really stick to that list. Somebody on the loving side here, they may take everything on the list, but they also might think, oh, I found these chips that my child has been wanting for months, and I'm going to buy these too. They may be somebody who's going to buy off the list, And then the last personality type here is energy. So this person is really focused on the here and now, focused on enjoyment, focused on fun and making sure others are enjoying their life today. And sometimes, again, like the loving personality, they can over-focus on the present, the here and now, and sometimes that future self where, we're thinking about, okay, saving for retirement, investing for the future. Remember that tension between today and tomorrow? Sometimes tomorrow's needs are sacrificed. But the beauty is that many, many couples have differing personalities. In fact, in my experience, when I've done this quiz with other couples, I've found that oftentimes couples have almost opposite personalities. And that's actually kind of a beautiful thing, because these personality types, they complement each other. Sometimes when we're talking to our partner and trying to make financial decisions or trying to sort through something that feels complex and heavy and hard to decide upon, sometimes we feel like we're coming at it and there's tension because we're looking at it from two different angles. Just like the IKEA closet wardrobe, right? My husband was thinking about it from a very practical perspective. I was thinking about it in terms of the aesthetic and the vibe and what it felt like. And initially, they felt like they were contrasts that really couldn't, find that compromise. But at the end of the day, because we were able to pull all of that together, we made better decisions because of that. I like to say that really, when couples work together, they have everything they need to create a thriving life. If we've got one partner who's thinking about the here and now and thinking to the content and just the thriving of life today and in the household, we've got another partner that's thinking a little bit more about the future. We need both of those aspects. We know that, we need and want things today, right? Of course we know that, but we also know we're going to need and want things in the future. And sometimes that's hard to see, but nevertheless, we know we're going to need and want those things. And so it's important for both partners to be part of that conversation. They're both important elements. Now I want to talk a little bit about what you can gain from, working together as a couple to make financial decisions and to be kind of in communication and in harmony with your finances. So I'm going to read some of these off. So couples who work together with their finances tend to have much more alignment. It's kind of, when you say the word money, I think there's a lot of different connotations that come into people's minds. We could rattle off a few right now, right? Like sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. But at the end of the day, money is not values neutral. where we choose to spend our money really reflects what we're valuing in life. And I like to say, when I'm working with clients, is that a lot of times our life goals end up really being money goals. And our money goals are life goals because they are intrinsically linked. If we think about vacations, well, those take money. If we think about where we want to live, well, it takes money to support that lifestyle. And so making decisions from where you want your life to be is intrinsically related to the money. So having these conversations with your partner means you're having really important conversations about life. You're not just having important conversations about money. They're important about life. You're gaining more alignment. You are increasing your understanding of each other and your empathy. I would say you're going to have more joy. You grow together instead of apart. You learn that each other's difference is not necessarily that you're playing for different teams, but that actually you're stronger together as one team. And at the end of the day, you have a feeling of mutual accomplishment when you are, leading things in your life that are important to you. So how do we begin? How do we start to have these conversations with a partner? I think, as I mentioned before, like when you mention money, it often comes up with a lot of connotations in mind. Like a lot of times there's some negative feelings about money, and, money is a loaded word. It really is. And it ties a lot to our own beliefs about money, how we were raised, experiences that we might have had, feelings of scarcity sometimes. And so it can be something that really elicits some really strong emotions in people. When we look at kind of statistics, fights about money are some of the nastiest, worst fights. If you look at kind of statistics of what that looks like, it's also one of the common leading reasons for divorce in this country. And so money can really be a big stressor for couples, understandably so. So I want to kind of lay the groundwork for how can you start having constructive conversations that, kind of ease that tension a bit. So these are some of my rules of thumb here. So the first one is to schedule regular money dates or money meetings with your partner. And the reason that you want to schedule them is that you want to be able to have a schedule. So you don't just want to sit down and have a 6-hour meeting with your partner and try to solve your financial world in one meeting. Oh boy, I see a lot of shaking heads here. That's probably not going to be a very fun afternoon, right? So we want to keep them kind of short and sweet and focused. So scheduling regular money dates is a really good way to do that. And if you're feeling anxious about the money, or if you're feeling like, we're gonna do this, where are we gonna do this? You can do it off-site. You can decide, hey, let's just go have a coffee somewhere. Let's go sit at a cafe, and we're gonna talk about this one topic. And then we're gonna round that up, and then the next time we have our money date, we're gonna talk about the second topic. The next point I want to make is to always assume positive intent. I think this is a really powerful one, meaning that assuming that when your partner says something to you or says something and brings something up, before rushing to judgments, assume that they're meaning something positive. Assume that they're not judging you. Really sit with it and give your partner that grace that you are assuming that they want the best for your family. They want the best out of this situation. They're not trying to make it worse. Suspend judgment. This is a lot like assuming positive intent. But the way I like to think about this is suspending judgment and listening to understand. This means that you're sitting with your partner and you're listening to understand what they are saying, not to respond to what they're saying. So not necessarily to, give advice, but to really understand where they're coming from. Stay curious. So ask your partner questions, open-ended questions about how they feel about things, how money makes them feel. I think learning more and more about your partner is going to be a really beneficial thing for this communication. Focus on the positive and the present. So focus on the good things. That we can all find bad things, and I think a lot of times in society we're almost trained to find the thing that's lacking or the thing that's not as good as it should be and trying to, okay, we're gonna improve that. Instead, think about some of the things that you've done that are positive. If you're thinking about your financial situation and you feel like, maybe it's not where you want to be just yet, you can also think about some of the characteristics that you have that are going to make you be able to pull through and be able to follow through with these financial plans. And maybe they might not be financial. It might be things like your willingness to be flexible, to be able to think creatively about things, to be able to be flexible to adjust lifestyle and adjust expenses as needed, to be able to talk through situations, to be able to leverage a network you might have for advice, for example. And focusing on the present. So, nothing kills a money date faster than bringing up a bad past decision and harping on it, right? Like, we all have them, especially the longer the relationship is. You can think of plenty, right? I think to have a constructive conversation, we try to stay as much in the present and focus on what we can do and the positive. And then focusing on shared values and a vision for the life you love. So I'm going to actually walk through these next steps. I'm going to walk through, this is the first part of kind of those money dates, is talking through how you're going to understand what those shared values are. I think that's a really important place to start. As I mentioned before, we want to keep the conversations focused and concise. You don't want to try to handle everything in one meeting. And to get help when you need it. So if you're kind of circling here and you're just like, we just cannot figure out what the next step is, we need some help, consider reaching out to a counselor, to a financial planner, or any other guidance as needed, and whatever that might look like for you. And remember that both of your voices matter. Just like in that personality quiz that we took, even if you have exact opposite, personalities there, even if one of you is the money partner, both of your voices are equally as important, equally as, important in designing the life that you want. When I work with clients, I think a lot of times they come to me and they think that I'm just going to tell them what they need to do. I'm the expert. I'm just going to rattle it off, and then they're going to do those things. But to be honest, I'm not the expert in my clients' lives. I don't know what is going to be the best advice for them. So I need to understand that first. And that's the same thing with in a partnership, is understanding what's important to the other partners so that you can make good decisions together. So the first part I want to start with here is kind of a suggestion for an agenda for these money dates. So the first set is going to be really trying to discuss and identify what your values are and kind of what your shared vision of a good life is. So I actually have provided a few take-home pages that I think we can probably load up to the YouTube as well. They are some exercises that feel free to use on one of these money dates. The first one is a money values, or it's actually just a values questionnaire. So in this questionnaire, basically, there's instructions on the page, and we're not going to do it here at this moment. This is something for you to take home and do later. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to go through and you're going to circle things that are important to you, and you'll each do this individually. And as the instructions go, you're going to start whittling down that list until you get to about 3 to 5 kind of core values that you feel like really describe what's important to you in your life. And I mean, granted, they're likely not going to be the same values as your partner, and that is perfectly okay. The first part of this is to really understand what's driving you. Like, what are those base values that really are important to you? And then to have a conversation, once you've had those values, kind of identify those values for yourself, having that conversation with your partner and describing what that means to you. You can even put it into a sentence. So you can even say, for example, let's see, this person here, this example says, I really value independence, family, and education. So you could put it into a sentence like, educating my family is so important because I want to make sure that we all develop independence, in our lifetime, or something like that. I just winged that, but you get the idea. Depending on what your values are, you can put it in almost a mission statement. And then combining that with your partner and seeing kind of where you land. I actually did this with my husband, Magnus, and we did it, I think, 3 years ago. And to this day, we still use this. We still go back to this. I learned something about my husband that night that I did not know. And it was really illuminating for me. So I hope that you find this useful as well. The next exercise, I think you can save for money date number 2. These are a little bit meatier, I would say, of questions. So it's a series of 3 questions, and they're questions that were written by a financial planner called George Kinder. He's kind of one of the father of financial life planning. So he's a very interesting financial planner, but he came up with these 3 really great questions that help you drive into what motivates you. If this question here says, imagine that you are financially secure and you've got enough money to take care of yourself now and in the future. How would you live your life? Describe a life that is complete and richly yours. So don't hold back. What would you do if you could imagine your life without needing to have any additional financial resources? And so you sit with that question, and you and your partner will sit down and you'll respond to it. You'll write it out. You'll take some time to think about it. It's kind of fun to think about, isn't it? Then you'll move on to the next question. The next question is, this time you visit your doctor who tells you that you have only 10 years left to live. The good news is that you're going to be really healthy for those 10 years. You won't even feel sick. But the bad news is that you will have no notice of the moment of your death. What will you do in the time you have remaining to live? Will you change your life, and how will you do it? So this puts a little bit more of a time pressure on it, right? It makes us recognize, okay, if the remaining years of my life are more scarce than I expect, how would I spend them? Where would I choose to spend my time? So you'll go through that with your partner. You'll sit down, you'll write your answers down. And when you're ready, you can move on to the last question. The last question, this time, the doctor shocks you with the news that you have only 1 day left to live. Notice what feelings arise in your body. Ask yourself, what did I miss? Who did I not get to be? And what did I not get to do? So this is not a very fun question, right? But it is a very introspective question. And it can really give you a lot of food for thought. It really harks to the question of, what would I regret? Where should I be spending my time? Or where should I have been spending my time and my resources? So you'll go through this, each of you, writing your own answers and thinking deeply about this. When you're ready to share, you can each read your answers. I would start with one partner reading through all 3 of their answers, and allowing some space to talk about it, for your other partner to ask questions and to ask you to elaborate and to understand why those things are important to you and what that means to you. Ask, how does this resonate for you? Does this make you think differently about how you're living your life today? What is showing up for you? And then you do the same thing for the second partner. These conversations are really, really powerful. I love these 3 questions because they really do get at the heart of, where you want to be spending your time, where you want to be spending your resources. And there's a lot of conversations that can come about from this. Like I mentioned before, this is something my husband and I did, and again, it was 3 years ago, and to this day, we still think back to those. When we're making financial decisions now, we think about, these are what our core values are, and this is what we envisioned, and these are the things that we knew we would regret if we weren't doing, and we weren't spending our time in those ways. And you'll also notice that when you have these conversations, it's not always going to come back to money. It's a lot of time, it's going to come back to how you're spending your time. And sometimes, like the first question, for example, it asks you to think creatively, imagine that you don't have to worry about money. Well, that's not reality, right? Even Oprah Winfrey has to worry about money. We all have to make money decisions, right? But what's fun about that question is that it gets you thinking creatively about possibilities. If there was nothing that was to hold you back, You might come up with something like, gosh, I would live on the beach and I would surf every day. And like my kids would go to surf school and then we would like become marine biologists. And I mean, I'm just making this up on the fly, right? And maybe that's not feasible in your life right now or your everyday, but could you move closer to that? Could you plan a vacation that's going to San Diego to go visit the beach and be able to visit the aquarium there? Can you move some things around in your life so that you're making sure you're spending more time in nature if that's something important to you? So there are ways that, even though, you might be dreaming up, like it's kind of the lottery scenario, it's not a pipe dream. It's how can we move closer to those things that are important to us? Here's another exercise. So we're going to move on now to a little bit more money-based things. So this is a little bit more concrete. So this exercise is going to kind of piggyback off of those questions and that values exercise. This is money date number 3. So here we're going to actually kind of put some goals down. We're going to rattle them off with our partner. So we're going to talk about, hey, what family and relationship financial goals do we have? And we're going to think about it in terms of the near term, over the next year, the next 2 to 3 years, next 4 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, et cetera, et cetera. And we can go through each of the lists. You can make this your own. You can put different categories in here. We've got home and environment, leisure, toys and recreation, education, development, work, career, charitable giving, community, spiritual. If there are categories here that you feel like, gosh, this should be its own category, add them by all means. A lot of times what we find, especially after having these conversations of like exploring the possibilities, like what could be possible in life, you might be thinking creatively. You might be thinking, gosh, I want to go, on this trip. I want to make sure we can remodel our kitchen. I want to make sure I would love to buy a second home. Like you may be thinking like all these great things, right? And that's great. Put them all down. This is the time where we can actually start prioritizing and kind of discussing what those goals look like. In reality, like I mentioned, even Oprah Winfrey has to make decisions about money, and that's the way it is for all of us. And sometimes, those financial realities may mean that we have to make choices between two things that we really like, two things that, one thing might be today, one thing might be well into the future. Putting them here on paper, though, allows us the ability to make those decisions and make those priorities as a couple. We can have those conversations. So when I said earlier about kind of suspend your judgment and assume positive intent, here I think is a perfect example of doing that. You and your partner may have very different ideas about, some of these projects, and you may also have different priorities of where you would weigh them. For example, if you're like me in the relationship, which I am a loving and energy, so I'm like on the kind of short term, like let's make this life the best it can be right now, and my husband is a very forward and futuristic thinking. So if you're like us, I might be thinking like, I think we should take this vacation this year, and I think we should, move into a bigger house, and I might be like planning all of our financial goals for the next 5 years. My husband might be thinking, well, you know what? We need and want those things today, but I'm going to tell you, we're going to need and want similar things in the future. So let's not rob ourselves by spending all that money today. So it's just another good way to have these conversations and kind of suspending that judgment and understanding that, two parts become a whole and we're better off because of it. All right. So probably now we're going to enter into the more like financial numbers aspect of this, which, many of you who came tonight probably thought, oh, a financial planner's coming. Great, we're going to talk about numbers. It's going to be great. So I've done 45 minutes now. We haven't talked about any numbers. But I do want to leave you with a framework for following money dates where you can start kind of getting the basics started. And I find that some of the best ways to do that are to look at cash flow and to look at your net worth. So we're kind of going to get started here. So, the budget, right? Budgeting is so much fun. Is that anybody's favorite topic here? No. Maybe Monica Geller from Friends could help us with this. I bet she would make a killer budget, right? It would be super organized, color-coded. I could use her, right? I'm going to start with just a really quick story about when I tried a budgeting software last summer after summer vacations and like busy sports schedule for the kids. I downloaded You Need a Budget, which itemizes all of your expenses on your credit card and your checking account and just spits it all out and tells you how much you've been spending. Whew, I wasn't ready for that number. I was not ready for that. As I eyed through it, looking at all the lists of all the expenses that I had spent that summer, I realized, there's a lot towards Grubhub, a lot of Grubhub. There were quite a few things like a gym membership that I hadn't been to all summer. That did not make me feel good, right? It brought some shame. I mean, I'm a financial planner, and honestly, I think that I'm pretty good at, managing my financial life, but I'll tell you what, I felt a little bit of shame about that. I felt like those weren't the best financial decisions. I should be using my resources more efficiently, But then when I got to a couple of expenses on that budget, one was a lunch that I had at Lit downtown, so it's a cute little bookstore downtown. And it reminded me of having a great lunch with my best friend, and we were just able to catch up and have a great conversation over that lunch, right? And then I saw some other expenses related to a vacation that we took, and that actually made me feel really good because I felt like I was spending money on those things in a way that really aligned with my values. So I say this because I know that budgeting is most people's most dreaded topic, and it's because of those reasons, right? It's kind of I have to face the shame and the reality that I'm not always perfect. And I just want to normalize that for everyone because nobody is perfect, right? Even Monica from Friends, she's not always perfect either, okay? So I want to give you a framework for a way that I think can kind of take a little bit of the self-judgment out of budgeting. So it's kind of called money buckets. So it's a flow-based budgeting approach. So I'm going to describe it because I've got this visual right here, and I hope it's helpful. So we've got income that's coming in from a job or investments or wherever our income is coming in from, could be from retirements. It's hitting our checking account. We've already made our contributions to retirement plans at work. We've paid taxes with withholding. We've paid our pre-tax benefit costs like our health insurance and things like that. And now it's hitting our checking account, all right? The way I want to think about budgeting is dividing it into different categories or different buckets. The resilience buckets, I think this is something that everyone needs to have. This is the same thing as an emergency fund. I like to call it resilience because to me it's more than just an emergency. It's something that, when something unexpected happens, like your tire pops or I don't know, the kids get sick and you need to take them to the doctor, whatever it might be, and it sets you back a few $100s or $1,000. The resilience bucket allows you to keep going. It allows you to maintain your life and not skip a beat. It allows you to continue saving in your retirement plans and not have to dip into those savings. So this is like an emergency fund, and it's really important to make sure that you have some type of resilience bucket set up. There's a lot of discussion about, how much should be in that fund. And I think in a grand, ideal world, it would be great to have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. That's kind of the benchmark or the kind of the rule of thumb, I would say. But not everybody starts there, So starting with $1,000 or $2,500, starting with something that gives you some comfort that you're able to continue to save and do things that will move you towards your goals. The next bucket are your fixed expenses. So those are going to be things that you pay for every month that don't have a lot of fluctuation. So it's going to be your mortgage, and if you escrow, your mortgage, property tax, homeowner's insurance. It's going to be your utilities, your water, your cable bill, your cell phone. Typically, when we look at cash flow and budgets, your fixed expenses are typically 65 to 75% of your overall expenses. And that's what I see on average. So they tend to be a lot of your monthly expenses. The thing about fixed expenses is that they should be automated. They happen every single month. They're fully expected. You know about pretty much what they're going to be, if not exactly what they're going to be, you can plan for them. At this moment of time, you can kind of consider them as, these are fixed costs that I have already assumed. These are decisions I have already made. On a monthly ongoing basis, you don't have to make active decisions about those. Now, that's not to say that, all of the fixed expenses that you have, you may be happy with. Like, there may be a subscription to Hulu that you don't use, or, I don't know, something out there that you're like, gym membership, right? I didn't go to the gym for a few months. There may be something out there that you're like, yeah, I should probably cut that because I just don't use that. That's good. Cut those things. That's a great idea. But for the most part, we want to kind of segregate those fixed expenses because we don't need to make a lot of decisions with them. They can kind of cause a lot of noise in our minds, right? Because, they are a lot in terms of the expense, but the decision there is not active anymore. It's more passive. So we can kind of keep them in their separate account and, allow them to kind of go on their own rotation. So have them kind of go as automatic payments. Fixed expenses also will include savings. So if you're saving into the resilience fund and you're saving $100 or $200 a month into that, consider that a fixed expense too. The next bucket here is flexi or flexible expenses. Now, these will probably vary from month to month. And one way that I would say in budgeting, these are typically the ones that are the hardest to pinpoint and identify, because they're going to be things like groceries, eating out, entertainment, going to sports, signing your kids up for sports, travel. It's going to be a lot of those things that kind of, are going to ebb and flow from month to month, from week to week, and season to season. So one way to think about those flexi expenses is to break them down into more of a weekly spending goal. And that might be $500. I don't know what, everybody's budget might be. It could be $250. Depending on what you can spend, you can break that down so that you're tracking it every week. Now that allows you a little bit more of a more instant feedback loop. So at the end of the week, if you take a look at that account where you're paying for flexible expenses and you're like, ooh, I was only supposed to spend $250 and I've spent $500. Well, that's information for you, right? That's information you can use to understand what your spending is. This is a very proactive way to budget as well. So instead of necessarily looking backwards and tracking all of the expenses, you can kind of do this going forward. And a lot of times when I'm working with clients, that flexi bucket there is really hard for people to know what they spend. So starting to track it really helps give them information so that they know with more certainty, okay, well, maybe $250 wasn't the right number. Maybe I really need $350 a week. So making adjustments as needed and as feasible as well. And then the final bucket here is the non-monthly bucket. So that's going to include things that aren't regularly scheduled monthly payments. They can be like insurance if you pay that quarterly or annually. It could be, if you don't escrow, it could be your real estate taxes. It could be quarterly estimated tax payments or tax payments at tax time if you tend to owe instead of get a refund. These are also really important to identify because they can be hard to plan for. I don't know how many of you have ever been surprised by those non-monthly things that come up, an insurance premium, for example, and you're like, oh yeah, that hits every September. I should know that by now. So trying to plan proactively to make sure that there's plenty of funds in that bucket will really help you in those situations. So basically, the way you kind of think about that non-monthly bucket is that you kind of itemize all of those expenses. You try to really think through all those things that are going to be coming up in the year. Identify what they are, itemize them, add them up, and then calculate a monthly amount. And then put that aside in that separate account every month so that you've got enough to kind of pay for those expenses when they come up. You may, because sometimes those non-monthly expenses, you may owe one next month. You're starting this budget today and your insurance premium may be due next month or in 2 months, and that's not enough time to build up the funds. You may want to pre-fund that account with half of the expenses so that that you've got money in there to kind of actually make this work. So I hope that this is a helpful visual. I know it's, budgeting's not always a fun thing to do. but I think it's an intuitive way to kind of think about budgeting and cash flow. Money date number 5. You see it's getting more and more fun every time, right? Get into those numbers. So money date number 5 is where we really start kind of looking at what we have. What do we have in terms of our assets? And what I like to do is like kind of just, hey, let's just grab a notepad and like start writing this down. It doesn't have to be fancy or formal. What I would do is just write down, hey, here's my checking account. I've got a savings account, maybe an investment account. Here's some retirement accounts. I've got a house. And this is where they're located, and this is what I think they're worth. On the right-hand side, I would recommend like writing down, like, what do I know about this account? What is it that I don't know and I should probably be thinking about or figuring out? And are there any action items that I need to do with this account? For example, if I have retirement accounts or a 401k at work, am I making sure that I'm at least making the match contribution so that I'm not leaving free money on the table? That would be something I'd be writing down right over there to check with my HR when I got back to work. Am I making sure that I have beneficiary designations on my retirement plans, my insurance? That's another thing I'd write down there if you didn't know the answer. So why is this important to me? That's another question you can ask for some of these. So sometimes we earmark certain accounts for certain goals that we might have. So for example, a joint investment account, might be looking to kind of fund that freedom that we'll have in the future before we retire. It might mean funding for a new house purchase in 10 years. So thinking about why those accounts are important to you and what you're going to need them to do for you. The next one is knowing what you owe. So we're going to do the same thing here, except we're going to talk about liabilities or loans. So we'll start with credit cards, student loans, any mortgage, any like lines of credit or anything. These are just examples. You may have a different list of liabilities, or you might not have any. But this is the same thing. We're going to say, where is it located? What's the value? What do I know about it? What do I need to know? And why is this important? So things on liabilities that I would really want to know is, what interest rate am I paying? What interest rate am I paying? Is it a fixed interest rate or is it fluctuating? So right now, interest rates are going up higher, but if we have a mortgage that maybe we took out a few years ago, it likely may be a fixed rate, right? But credit card payments are typically floating rate. They're typically a higher interest rate. So those are things that we want to know. We write them down. We're just gathering information at this point. Why is this important to me, and what do I need to know about this? So student loans might be a part of your landscape, right? And student loan environment right now is really complex and really uncertain, and where are we going to go from here? We don't necessarily know, right? But there are questions that you can write down to find answers. And sometimes those answers might be like, you know what, I think I need some professional guidance. And if that's the case, that can be that next step. You can figure out, do I talk with a financial planner, or do I talk with somebody at the library who can help me here? And then sometimes there are other assets that are important. So it could be if you own a business, thinking about the value of your business. It could be if you have a pension system, what is involved with that. Some people have something called equity compensation with their companies. So if they work for a company like a technology firm, for example, they might get paid a salary, but in addition, they might also get some shares of stock, which may not be worth much now, but in the future, who knows, right? So these are things that, you want to keep a track of. Inheritance could also be something that, could be just in the back of your mind. Like maybe that's something, I don't know. I don't want to count on it, but, my parents have told me that, they are planning for this. So those are good things to talk about. And then once you've done that, you can actually pull together a personal balance sheet or a net worth statement. So it's actually quite simple to do. So you just create total assets. So you add up that first page, everything that you own, you add it all up. You put that number here. You add up all of your liabilities, that second page. You add that right there. And then you take your total assets and you subtract your total liabilities and you get to a grand total, and that's the current net worth. Now, if that current net worth, if you don't like what that number says, know that that does not mean anything about you. That does not define you. But it is kind of, and a lot of times, especially, early on in life, people have negative net worths. And that's quite typical. Student loans, buying a house, like you're still in that stage of life where you're building assets. And one thing that's often not reflected in a balance sheet is the fact that you have human capital. The value of your work, your value of your ability to make money is probably the greatest asset that you have. So I say that because I don't want anyone to ever think that this is your worth or this identifies you. We're just gathering facts right now. This is just where we stand today. So one thing that I think as we talk about these money dates that can be a good thing to track from year to year is, where does my net worth change? And I think everybody would agree that having a more positive number is a good thing, right? Over time, we do want that to increase. And that means lowering our liabilities, paying down loans, and or increasing our assets, okay? So one thing that you could track together over time would be year-over-year change. So how have we done? Have we increased our savings to retirement plans? Have we been able to pay off some of those high-interest loans? And celebrate those things as those come along. All right, we are at 1 minute left, and I just want to pull this all together here with the last slide. This is kind of money date number 6. So I know this looks like a lot of information, but it's a way to kind of pull everything together in a snapshot or a dashboard. This is something that you could pull together in future money dates to kind of track how you're doing. And what I've started here is, you can see here at the top left, values and purpose. So here we've kind of identified some of those core values, some of those core value words that were important to this couple. This couple put it in kind of in terms of almost a mission statement. They wrote, time with family, enjoying nature, learning and serving our community. Like, those are things that are important to this couple, okay? They wrote down here their goals timeline. That was from that goals exercise worksheet that we did. So we kind of write down, okay, short term all the way out to lifetime goals, and how that's kind of coming down the pike. Right over here in this column, or in this corner here, we've got the balance sheets. So that's where we're tracking, how are we doing in terms of increasing our assets and decreasing our liabilities. In the middle, we have cash flow. And here I use an example. This is, you need a budget. You can certainly use anything like Mint, you need a budget, or Monarch. There's lots of, tracking you can do online if you like that. And then here are action items. So these are things that as a couple you can talk about, like, these are things that we should do. In the next money date, let's try to make sure that we fund our Roth IRAs, or we check our beneficiary designations to make sure those are looking really good. They're going to be personal. And then, I know we didn't talk about this time, but investments are also an important thing to be tracking, and making sure that you're making good investment choices, and that it's allocated appropriately for your timeline and what your goals are, essentially. So money, I'm going to say it again, money can elicit really strong feelings, but that is normal and that's okay. And remember that when you work together, you have everything that you need to create a thriving future, and together you make a life whole. So thank you so much for your time today and your time online. Really enjoyed being able to present this to you, and I hope that you were able to get something from it. So thank you very much. If you ever need to contact me, my information's right here. I'd be happy to help. All right. Thank you.